Penicillin sat on a shelf for 10 years while I was called a quack. Nature makes penicillin, I just found it. The discovery of penicillin was a triumph of the accident, a fortunate occurrence that happened while I was working on a purely academic bacteriological problem. If penicillin can cure those that are ill, Spanish sherry can bring the dead back to life. How fortunate we didn't have these animal tests in the 1940s, for penicillin would probably not have been granted a license, and possibly the whole field of antibiotics might never have been realized. I have been trying to point out that in our lives chance may have an astonishing influence and, if I may offer advice to the young laboratory worker, it would be this: never to neglect an extraordinary appearance or happening. I play with microbes. There are, of course, many rules to this play, but when you have acquired knowledge and experience it is very pleasant to break the rules and to be able to find something nobody has thought of. It was astonishing that for some considerable distance around the mold growth the staphylococcal colonies were undergoing lysis. What had formerly been a well-grown colony was now a faint shadow of its former self. I was sufficiently interested to pursue the subject. There are two ways of getting rid of sorrows, one by living them down, the other by drowning them. The coachman drowned his. He informed her that her luggage. For the birth of something new, there has to be a happening. Newton saw an apple fall, James Watt watched a kettle boil, Röntgen fogged some photographic plates. And these people knew enough to translate ordinary happenings into something new. I have been trying to point out that in our lives chance may have an astonishing influence and, if I may offer advice to the young laboratory worker, it would be this: never to neglect an extraordinary appearance or happening. It is the lone worker who makes the first advance in a subject. The details may be worked out by a team, but the prime idea is due to enterprise, thought, and perception of an individual. We still do not know 1/1000% of what nature has revealed to us. A good gulp of hot whiskey at bedtime, it's not very scientific, but it helps. The unprepared mind cannot see the outstretched hand of opportunity. One sometimes finds what one is not looking for. It is the lone worker who makes the first advance in a subject. The details may be worked out by a team, but the prime idea is due to the enterprise, thought, and perception of an individual. Suggested remedy for the common cold: a good gulp of whiskey at bedtime. It's not very scientific, but it helps. You do not know what you will find. You may set out to find one thing and end up discovering something entirely different. Suggested remedy for the common cold: a good gulp of whiskey at bedtime. It's not very scientific, but it helps. Penicillin cures, but wine makes people happy. The lone hand has advantages as well as the much advertised teamwork, but each in its own place. It may be, usually is, in fact, a false alarm that leads to nothing, but it may on the other hand be the clue provided by fate to lead you to some important advance. One sometimes finds what one is not looking for. When I woke up just after dawn on September 28, 1928, I certainly didn't plan to revolutionize all medicine by discovering the world's first antibiotic, or bacteria killer. But I guess that was exactly what I did. It is not difficult to make microbes resistant to penicillin in the laboratory by exposing them to concentrations not sufficient to kill them, and the same thing has occasionally happened in the body. The time may come when penicillin can be bought by anyone in the shops. Then there is the danger that the ignorant man may easily underdose himself and by exposing his microbes to non-lethal quantities of the drug make them resistant. The discovery of penicillin was a triumph of accident, a fortunate occurrence which happened while I was working on a purely academic bacteriological problem. I have been trying to point out that in our lives chance may have an astonishing influence and, If I may offer advice to the young laboratory worker, it would be this: never neglect an extraordinary appearance or happening. It may be, usually is, in fact, a false alarm that leads to nothing, but may on the other hand be the clue provided by fate to lead you to some important advance. In my first publication I might have claimed that I had come to the conclusion, as a result of serious study of the literature and deep thought, that valuable antibacterial substances were made by molds, and that I set out to investigate the problem. That would have been untrue, and I preferred to tell the truth that penicillin started as a chance observation. My only merit is that I did not neglect the observation and that I pursued the subject as a bacteriologist. My publication in 1929 was the starting point of the work of others who developed penicillin, especially in the chemical field. It has been demonstrated that a species of Penicillium produces in culture a very powerful antibacterial substance which affects different bacteria in different degrees. Generally speaking, it may be said that the least sensitive bacteria are the gram-negative bacilli, and the most susceptible are the pyogenic cocci. In addition to its possible use in the treatment of bacterial infections, penicillin is certainly useful for its power of inhibiting unwanted microbes in bacterial cultures, so that penicillin-insensitive bacteria can readily be isolated. In not a few, the opium-eating habit has crept upon them almost unconsciously, during the medicinal use of opiates to soothe pain, to remove sleeplessness, or to arrest protracted bowel complaint. The risk of this evil should therefore be carefully borne in mind, for lifelong misery has often been caused by undue laxity in the prescribing of opiates. It is possible that in 10 years' time penicillin itself will be a back number and will be replaced by something better. It is quite certain, though, that to displace penicillin any newcomer will have to be very, very good. The active agent is readily filterable, and the name penicillin has been given to filtrates of broth cultures of the mold. It is suggested that it may be an efficient antiseptic for application to, or injection into, areas infected with penicillin-sensitive microbes. The greatest possibility of evil in self-medication, with penicillin, is the use of too small doses, so that, instead of clearing up the infection, the microbes are educated to resist penicillin, and a host of penicillin-fast organisms is bred out which can be passed on to other individuals and perhaps from there to others until they reach someone who gets a septicemia or pneumonia which penicillin cannot save. In such a case, the thoughtless person playing with penicillin treatment is morally responsible for the death of the man who finally succumbs to infection with the penicillin-resistant organism. I hope this evil can be averted.